when I started engaging and learning more and more about working with freelancers and independent contractors, I saw this as an avenue to deliver for my internal clients what they really need with value that I hadn't really considered before.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, president of Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. And this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for shareholders, customers, and the community. Please follow, rate, and review Good Morning HR wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at goodmorninghr.com. We've discussed the Department of Labor's recent updates to the independent contractor rule several times this year. And every time we've pretty much come up to the conclusion that not much has really changed for most employers. They were already misclassifying employees as independent contractors. But employee versus independent contractor isn't necessarily a business's only option. Many companies are turning to freelance talent to augment their access to talent while sidestepping the whole employee versus independent contractor paradigm. And today, I'm pleased to welcome Tony Buffum to the podcast. Tony is the VP of HR Client Strategy at Upwork, an online platform connecting businesses to freelancers and independent contractors from over 90 countries. At Upwork, Tony helps clients solve staffing challenges related to finance, procurement, and talent transformation. Tony has more than 2 decades of experience leading global HR teams at the most senior levels with companies like FLIR Systems, Stanley Security, and Stanley Black & Decker. He is also chair of the PEI Operating Partners Human Capital Forum and is an advisor to venture capital firms. Welcome to Good Morning HR, Tony.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's really great to be here.
I really appreciate you being here. So let's start by talking about the freelance workforce in the U.S. In 2017, it was estimated to be over 57 million. Then 2020 happened, and most estimates seem to suggest the number's around 75 million today. So who are these people who are working freelance?
It's really everybody. Every generation is freelancing, but we definitely see a higher rate of freelancing, as you probably guessed it, with Gen Z and millennials, younger generations that are pursuing a much more varied type of career that's very much in their own control, like the accessibility of platforms or anything else with the amazing transparency we have now that gives them access to really kind of control this new type of butterfly career that folks have. So we see a lot of it across all generations, but a higher amount with these younger generations that are kind of bucking the trend with traditional 9-to-5 jobs.
So are most of these folks that are freelancers, are they working full-time in those roles? Or are they augmenting? Is this like a side gig for them and they're working, a corporate job too? Or what does that look like?
Yeah, the answer is all of the above. We see it across all different types of employment. Upwork's Research Institute recently surveyed, I'll focus on Gen Z, because I know a lot of people are interested in that. How do we get that particular type of talent right now? And when you look at that population, 39% are working this kind of portfolio career where they're not working a W-2 job. They're out there just working projects and whatever they can do on a freelance basis. Maybe about 26% are working long-term freelance or independent consultant engagements. And then, about a quarter are doing this as a moonlighting option, as a side hustle, as some might call it. And that the rest is made up of people doing kind of the short-term gig work that some folks talk about, or they're just founded their own company or agency, via a platform like ours or another one.
So, yeah, and here at Imperative, we've definitely used Upwork to hire technical people to, we do a lot of custom software stuff to meet certain client needs and weird APIs with their systems, and we've used Upwork folks for that. But what kinds of roles are typical for, a platform like Upwork? It's not really quite gig economy, straight labor stuff. So what kind of jobs do y'all typically fill at the professional level?
Yeah, Upwork is made up of this merger of two platforms, Elance and Odesk, some 10 years ago. One that focused very much on tech or IT talent. And so that was a huge population. That was pretty much the primary population for them. And the other that focused on marketing talent, creative, content development, that type of thing. As they merged, those continue to be really our most popular areas. But the fact of the matter is, you can find any type of skill level, capability on the platform. So I've found HR folks on there. There's legal talent, of course, finance, actuarial talent. So what I like about the Upwork platform is oftentimes people are drawn to looking for that hard to find, in need tech marketing, or especially now AI talent and folks with that, generative AI capability. But that's what gets them started. And as they dig deeper, again, just like I did when I was a client, you find that you can really get just about anything done with a variety of different skill sets. And oftentimes things that people don't expect that someone that's available on a fractional capability platform to find.
There was once that idea that freelancers were these folks who were misfits. They couldn't cut it in the corporate world. Those are also called entrepreneurs, because I'm an example of that. I was good
Sure.
for 5 years at a time and then couldn't stick around much longer than that. But I think that idea that, just freelancers are these exiles from corporate America has really changed in the last 10 years or so. So why do most of these professionals work freelance? You mentioned flexibility, but maybe expand on that.
Yeah, well, one, I agree. Maybe it's not exiles either, just from corporate world. People that just have moved on from what they recognize as no longer an employment contract, but like a lease agreement. They don't have the security that they had maybe when my dad was working at Xerox
Right.
for his whole career. That's changed a lot. So you have a lot more people, and I would say that's one of the top reasons, the opportunity to define where your career goes. And I think a lot of people do it primarily for that level of control over their career, over their hours. So certainly it provides flexibility, but they may still be working 9 to 5, but they're doing it on projects that they want to work on with companies that they want to work with for durations that they also choose. So they have so much more control over the work they do. And oftentimes it's something that they're really passionate and really good at. And I try to help remind folks that are as I'm trying to break down some of the myths like you described, like this idea that there are people that just couldn't make it. It's oftentimes people, they really love doing a particular thing, and they've developed that as with a level of expertise that they can do it more efficiently than someone in a generalist job doing it part-time and trying to learn while they go. And they know that they can deliver speed and value to lots of clients, and they can build on that while at the same time upskilling and reskilling themselves on the technologies that will continue to make them better, faster, stronger in the future.
Is there a difference between what we think of as gig jobs and the gig economy and the freelance workforce?
Yeah, there is. I mean, when we think of a lot of the gig work, oftentimes, because it's what we probably use most often, or is things like Uber and Lyft or DoorDash or Wag, or all these much more kind of hourly labor focused roles. And that's been great. I think that's been great for our economy. It's certainly transformed industries. But when we look at freelance and independent contractors available on platforms like ours, this is more of that white collar skill set. For ours in particular, think of anything that can be done behind a computer screen anywhere in the world. You can find that talent on our platform, and they're doing things that are longer, or they're going to be any kind of variety of length or a statement of work project, and any kind of skill level. I've worked with clients whose head of procurement negotiating our renewal is someone that is an interim procurement leader that they found on our platform. So I would think, okay, so we've already made the value proposition clear. Now it's just a matter of working out the numbers. But truly, if you can find someone that's an interim officer and someone that can design your app, this is a lot different than we have with the skill set that's doing more of the gig work.
Well, that's interesting because I never thought about it like that fractional CFO or that fractional HR leader. We just did an episode about a month ago around that topic, fractional leadership. And I never even thought about going to one of the platforms like Upwork to say, I need this HR support. I need the strategic side. We've got Tab A and Slot A, we've got that stuff, but what we need is somebody to help sit down with us and talk what our long-term strategy needs to be.
Well, and Mike, you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation the growth of freelancing. So it stands to reason that not only from a generational perspective, as we see more and more, a higher percentage of the newer generations choosing this as their career, self-guided, kind of choose your own adventure career. You also see folks that are near the end of their careers, maybe retiring early, or they've decided they want to go into business for themselves, seeing platforms as a way to give them access to essentially hang a shingle without doing the same type of individual sales and marketing work, because they know they can go and find the need available on the platform and bid and compete for that need. So I think we're going to continue to see a shift of folks searching that out. Even while the rate for millennials and Gen Zs between 44%, 50% respectively, it's still about 25% of boomers that are participating in freelance and independent contract work. And to me, that speaks to this: folks that have the experience, but maybe they are retired, but they just want to slow down. They want to work on their own schedule. They maybe want to take the summer off, or maybe they want to take the winter off. Whatever it is, they can create those opportunities by working through a platform like this. And I think we'll continue to see that grow as more people just become aware and of the opportunity, and as the stigmas, like you touched on earlier, as those shake loose more and more.
So it's been consistently growing, the number of freelancers in the market. How much of that do you think is technology that's made it easier to do that, and platforms like Upwork, versus 2020 and the pandemic and the lockdown? Or maybe there's another factor. I'm not sure. I mean, what do you think is driving the growth in the market, I guess, is a fairer question.
It definitely starts with technology. And when you look at the impact, this is something I really love, the impact that technology has had on talent, labor, and their relationship to work and their relationship to employers, that's been rapidly changing. I mean, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have dreamed of having my resume posted online for anybody and everybody to see 24/7. And now, if someone, I meet somebody or someone applies for a job and they're not on LinkedIn, I wonder if they're a real person.
Yeah, you wonder what's going on here, right?
Why don't you exist? What are you hiding? But that's an example of technology has created and introduced this transparency with things like Glassdoor, where you can get increased understanding of the culture of companies, but also their interview questions, how much they pay. You can see any opportunity for any job posted on any board anytime. That increased transparency has created all of this change in much more frictionless movement from one job or opportunity to another. Then the pandemic took this change and transformation that was already in place and just accelerated it. And it really just took off. And so many people said, saw that as an opportunity as the traditional job market bottomed out. Said, all right, well, I'm going to get out there and do something. And so I'll embrace this. And it wasn't for everybody, but there was more and more people that got traction with that and said, I think this can be a career. And don't think they're not telling their friends and neighbors and previous coworkers about this experience they've created for themselves. So I think the pandemic accelerated this this cultural and technology-driven trend already in place. And I think the more that it gets exposure, and the more, frankly, that larger enterprises embrace it, the more that we'll see that momentum continue to grow.
So when does a business typically turn to a freelancer for assistance versus just trying to hire their own, or maybe going to a local staffing agency or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and for so many enterprise clients I talk to, it's when they're desperate. Like they've tried their traditional hiring, they have temps, agency partners, and it's just not working. They're not getting the talent they need fast enough. They're struggling to get in-demand talent competitively, and they can't hold on to it. And I experienced that as a client when I was at Stanley Black & Decker leading HR for our global security business. Just so many times, like so many circumstances where I just struggled to get our organization and our business leaders what they need. And as an HR leader, I think of it as Maslow's hierarchy. Like that first level, is food, water, shelter, benefits, payroll, and getting the right people in the right jobs
Right.
at the right time. And when I'm not doing that, I just constantly felt like I was chasing this ball downhill. And so out of that desperation is when I finally started answering emails from Upwork, who had been knocking on my door for months and months and months. And I ignored it because to me, freelancing, like we don't do that. Like that's for tech companies. It's not for like an industrial service driven company, whatever we are. And finally I said, I need to consider what this is because nothing else is really what I'm doing right now isn't meeting the moment. And when I started engaging and learning more and more about working with freelancers and independent contractors, I saw this as an avenue to deliver for my internal clients what they really need with value that I hadn't really considered before. And I think a lot of organizations find it in the same way. They're like, we really need this tech talent, or we need AI talent. We want to experiment like everybody else is, but we know we can't hire someone full time because we don't even know what we want to do. We just want to experiment and try it out. We don't know what we don't know. And that's when they start listening to, well, what about a freelance? What can we learn from a freelance expert in Gen AI that we can experiment and practice with and train ourselves and then maybe venture into new spaces. And actually from that point, start to define a strategy that could work for us longer term.
Well, and definitely, I mean, we've benefited with freelancers on the IT side with some mentoring. I mean, we're trying to figure out an API and didn't have the in-house experience with it. And working with some freelancers, they were able to even do a little training on our end so that we could either maintain whatever they helped us build or just build the experience out, and internally. So are most of the freelance roles, are these mostly just single projects and the employer says, I've got to do this right now, or we need this twice a year, 3 times a year? Or do you have employers who have ongoing needs who basically are not, let's not say employers because they're freelancers, but let's say businesses who are on an ongoing basis using maybe the same freelancer over a long period of time?
It's really both. And maybe I would say it probably wasn't both 20 years ago, but it's grown so much. When you're looking at, I think it's like 86, 87 million people in the US freelancing by 2027, which will be about 50% of the US workforce. It's not just one category anymore. You're walking into Target and everything that you want is all in one place. Whether you want ongoing, contracts that last years, or you just have a project that is going to last a couple days. It really runs the gamut. And employers also large employers run the gamut. Some are using talent on a regular basis, and some are still working in just that project, circumstance. Like I think a great use case is an organization that's doing a lot of M&A. M&A, and for anybody that's gone through that, there's this spike in demand, both pre and post deal, where you have to do a lot of due diligence effort and you're pulling your people out in the field. So maybe you're augmenting your team with folks that can step in and take care of some of those tasks. Or it's post deal where, to me, I see a lot of acquisition integrations fail due to the lack of things like communication. Something that's super easy, but you're so busy with systems integration, which you can also get help with. But trying to make these strategic decisions, getting everybody on the same email and benefits programs, that telling everybody what's going on is an easy thing to kind of let slip. When you could bring on freelancers to augment the team and help create that content, drive it to the organization, and keep the employee population engaged and interested and feeling like they're still part of what's taking place. So I think things like there's always great use cases like that pull employers in to going, hey, we know we need extra help. We can't keep just stretching out our team. It'll burn them out, and we'll continue to see high turnover, which, even though the Great Resignation is over, higher than pre-pandemic turnover is still the norm. And so a lot of that is related to things like burnout or things like putting too much on your teams as organizations in 2023 and probably still the first half of 2024 are apprehensive of adding headcount. If they don't have another lever within their ecosystem of opportunities to pull, they're going to keep pulling the same lever, which is just put more and more work on our fixed headcount. And that can be a recipe for lower productivity and higher turnover.
And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 3/4 of a recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Recert Credits. Then select episode 155 and enter the keyword Freelance. That's FREELANCE. And if you're looking for even more recertification credit or you just want to learn something, I'm hosting a webinar on July 11th entitled The Ethical and Practical Considerations on the Use of AI in Human Resources. We'll talk about the history of artificial intelligence, the ways we use it every day without realizing it, and how generative AI, like ChatGPT, can bring value and risk to the organization. We'll also consider the ethical issues employers face as they implement AI. This free webinar is pre-approved for an hour of recertification credit from both HRCI and SHRM, and you can register at imperativeinfo.com/webinars. And now back to my conversation with Tony Buffum. And so, especially if it's going to be an ongoing person who's, providing support to us, there are still employers who are pretty hesitant about remote work at all. Or maybe they're in a hybrid situation, but there may be circumstances because of data security or things like that where they feel like this work needs to be done on premises. Are there situations where freelancers don't work from their bedroom or remote, and they actually come in on site to an employer or employers or a company's premises?
It certainly happens. It's for a platform like ours, it's the exception, not the rule. But we put on just about every other month our own kind of small conference for prospect companies and existing customers alike to help them understand what's changing in terms of trends in the economy and how to think about change management, how to think about embracing this workforce ecosystem. And I think it's a phenomenal event. But we, of course, hire freelancers to help support us in that event that are doing things like recording video or supporting that, the production of the event. So there's lots of examples where freelancers show up on site. The classification questions come into play when you think about the level of direction, the requirement around their time, and the extent, how extensive that is. So there's a lot of things that, frankly, a lot of HR leaders or organizations that are thinking about using freelancers and they want to engage with them, but they're not sure about how to do it the right way from a classification perspective. Frankly, it's a part of why I chose Upwork, because we have such a phenomenal classification team, and one of our product offerings indemnifies employers. So when you're reading all these lawsuits and all these fines, for me, again, when I was a client before I joined Upwork, that was something I said, all right, I want that risk to disappear. We can't handle that internally. Let's take the path where we know whatever the right classification is, we're going to get it. And we can go back to just worrying about what talent do we need to fit what outcome or deliverable that we need, and get it as quickly as we can.
So when a company works with a platform like Upwork to bring that talent into, for a project or for longer term, let's say Imperative, we're really contracting with Upwork, right? And you're paying those freelancers directly and our agreements with you. And so it's like we used, a major accounting firm for our accounting, and we've got an account signed to us. They're giving us and we're asking them to help us and do this and this project or whatever, but it's still the accounting firm that that we're dealing with. And is that that's mostly the relationship y'all have, right?
Yeah, you can think of it that way. I mean, for sure. And I think what makes it easier is you're working with different freelancers, some that may be ongoing several months or a year, or working on a project that's just a few days. we take care of paying them as soon as the project's over, because freelancers can't be working on 60 and 90-day terms.
Mhm.
But we invoice you on a monthly basis, consolidating all that spend. Again, I think the one of the big value props for Upwork is focus on the talent, like focus on what you need, what the tasks are that need to get done, and what the skills are required to do that, and who are the people that have it, and then go find them. And we really take care of the rest, all the way to W-2ing employees if that's what's required. So we take care of all of that for you. So talent is what remains in focus for the organization.
But you mentioned W-2s. Are there situations where somebody would come to a company through like an Upwork and end up getting a W-2 from that company? Or would that just be, how does that, because you also mentioned independent contractors versus freelancers. So maybe we need to clarify that too.
Yeah. So let's start with, there's circumstances where the classification, the project you want to get done, W-2ing that talent, it might be the appropriate classification for the type of work. So we take care of that. We take care of the payrolling for that employee, or for that person that's now an employee, and we bill you accordingly. There are also circumstances where someone that's a freelancer or independent contractor, you said definition, I kind of use both interchangeably, but that individual may be interested in converting to a full-time employee. And now I think last year we came out with a badging system where someone could raise their hand and say, I'm willing to be converted. And organizations can post jobs saying, this is a job that we're interested in potentially converting people to full-time roles. We created that out of a demand for really a lot of our enterprises that ask that question up front, because frankly, when they work with someone for a short time, they're used to using that as a part of their screening process.
Right. That temp to hire process that we use. Yeah.
I think that's a mentality that a lot of procurement HR organizations engage with this in, frankly, because they're still used to the paradigms that they're used to. So even when they're thinking about working with independent contractors, they're thinking, yeah, but I can convert them, right? Because what if I really like them? And I always tell them, as long as they want to be. But remember, not everybody that's out there that's contracting wants to work for a company. And it's kind of like where we started the conversation. There's a lot of folks that are like, hey, I want to do this project for your company, but then I want to choose who I work with next. And maybe I'll come back and work with you later. And maybe for a company, they want to know, like, if you're a good fit, I want to be able to pull you on board. So I think, the opportunity is there. But I think a lot of folks that are looking for engaging with this freelance population, they need to be open-minded, and they need to think about how much of this is driven, this idea that I want to convert them is driven by that long time paradigm, and how much is actually driven by the true need and kind of the investment and onboarding, et cetera, that you want to hold on to once you get that person on board.
So if an employer's looking at working with freelancers, what are challenges that they would face? I mean, let's assume that we don't have the tax issues, that we've eliminated those. We're working with a partner for that. So what are other challenges? I think about, things like, working with other staff and trying to figure out, communicate to them who are, what our values are, kind of give them an idea of what the company is, those kinds of things. But then also like things like quality assurance and managing progress on a project, and then what other legal and compliance issues, those kind of things. What kind of things should an employer be ready to consider?
I like the way you kind of walk through the examples, because the truth really, Mike, is the biggest challenges are all internal, cultural. Again, I keep referring to these paradigms, but things like you mentioned, like, well, how do we work with someone like this? And in cases where remote is relatively infrequent for a company, like, how do we work with someone even remotely? Or how do we work with someone that's a freelancer versus employee? Do we treat them the same way? Or how do we identify and introduce this opportunity to hiring managers who are probably just going to resist the idea of not just having a generalist headcount they could just throw things at without having to define what does success look like, what are the milestones, and they're used to kind of just getting a headcount on board and just giving them whatever comes up. So there's a lot of change management, a lot of cultural change that really needs to take place to maximize the benefits of a freelance program. But there's also things that I think a lot of organizations that are just tactical. Things like security of the systems, NDAs, things that just make the work happen. Like, how are they going to collaborate? What tools do they get access to? What folders, files, that type of thing. Those I think are tactical things that can be really different in a lot of different organizations. Like, how are they going to get access to our systems? Are we going to send them a virtual desktop, or are we going to send them our own equipment? That's a lot of organizations have different risk tolerances or just kind of cultural norms driving. Yes, we have to send them our equipment. And if you're sending freelancers your equipment, that might be what your organization needs to do, but it might limit the type of projects that you're willing to send out equipment for. Like smaller 2-day projects, if you have to send it out, then you're probably not looking for talent in that space. So I think at the end of the day, it's really what I love about this job is helping people understand this isn't just a decision tree that's like, when can I work with a full-time employee? When do I choose temp? When do I choose a freelancer? In embracing this type of work ecosystem, they have to take a step back and just look at the work without jobs. They have to look at what are the outcomes that we're trying to deliver, break them down from jobs, and then figure out what's the best resource within that ecosystem of not just full-time employees, temps, freelancers, agencies, but also technology. Sometimes that lever that you want to pull is automation that can be provided by a one-time provider. And then from now on, that's an automated task. When you take that approach, you're going to have a lot more success embracing a system like this than if you just are thinking, can this job be freelanced? Because you're still thinking in that job mentality. And there's nothing wrong with that. To me, that's the crawl of the walk, run, progress. But I think the long-term effectiveness is folks realizing, again, like we started this conversation, technology and talent are changing so much and so rapidly that the work system that we're deploying activity and we're aligning resources with has to really undergo this transformational change too, or you're just trying to solve the new problems with something that looks and feels like the same solutions.
And I know when we've worked with freelancers on the IT side, we've even created test data sets, so we're extracting any PII or anything like that, and provided that so that they'd had a data set to work on. I don't think we've ever even considered, even though we've got remote desktops, we've never even thought about providing a remote desktop access. But I can see where that would be useful. But the other thing is, because when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. We are a background investigations company. And so before we ever gave access to anybody, especially on the IT side, we just made it really clear. We're going to run the same kind of background check, a little different authorizations and disclosure language, but we're going to run the same background check we do on any other employee before we give you access to the keys to the kingdom, especially in the IT area. Do you see other employers doing that? I mean, yeah. I know so many employers get burned by just in-house contractors. Their IT people bring somebody in, and then they get a data breach and they don't know why. And well, your IT contractor wasn't doing good background checks and you never asked. And so do you see those kind of arrangements? Do you see employers taking the same level of security concerns with some of these freelancers?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think the breadth of clients that we have now is so wide that I see it all. And there are plenty of clients that have to background check every single person. They just refuse to do it differently. And that's fine. Like, that's what works for them. My view is, all right, then do that. And because if that's where you need to start, then start there. But I think if that's what helps them kind of get the ball rolling in terms of embracing change, they may over time start to think, you know what, maybe there's some work we could get done that we don't need to do a background check. Maybe if we're going to have someone turn around a PowerPoint slide that communicates what our new benefits options are to our internal employees, I don't know if we need to background check that person. But if they're going to be integrating new systems from an acquisition, maybe we want to background check that person because they could potentially have a lot of impact on a lot of different things that affect our clients and our internal employees and whatever. So I think I like to think of it as more of a menu of options, and organizations that say, for these type of deliverables and these types of skills and projects, we need to apply the same type of controls that we apply to our employees that we hire, because it gives us a sense of security and safety. I understand that. I think they might identify over time more opportunities where they don't think that's necessary.
Oh, sure.
So
Yeah,
I
if I
think
just need a PowerPoint that's not full of proprietary information, I'm not going to sweat it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this will open the door for them when they see the kind of quality and the kind of talent and how much they can trust it. Like, I often, we talked about stigmas before, and there's a lot of myths, I think, that extend to the freelance and independent community. At the same time, there's a lot of myths, or a halo effect that we apply to our employees. Because as much as we can say, hey, there's a data breach from your independent contractor, does that never happen with employee populations, or do employee populations never download a bunch of data before they leave and go to a competitor? Like, similar things happen. What I think is different now, what I know is different with this contract community versus employees when we hire a full-time person. More often than not, when you go on LinkedIn and you review their resume, or you review their profile and you get their resume and you review that, and you call the 3 people that they asked you, that they told you could call, all you're getting is what they want you to know.
Right.
You're not getting the 5-star rating on their performance on all the jobs they've done so far on the platform. You're not finding out how much money have they made so far, how many jobs have they completed, and what is their job completion score. Things that, like we talked about in the beginning, bring transparency to this type of work that make it much more of a reputation-based transaction than a interview and charisma and trust transaction. Like, trust everything I put on this resume, and I believe me that I can do all these things.
Yeah. If all the applicants were honest, I would be out of work. I mean, let's be honest. So yeah, you're totally right. And to get good feedback. So you mentioned ratings, total earnings that freelancers made on the platform, and what was the number of projects completed?
Yeah,
so,
project completion score. So
okay.
if you do 100 projects, you complete them all in time, you're going to have 100% project completion score. That means that the customer, when it was done, said, yes, they did everything I asked them to do. They did it on time, etc.
So when you've got those 3 factors, is there anything else that when an employer's looking at a freelancer that they should be evaluating? How do I pick the right freelancer? If I've got, if there are 24 of them available who respond to my, my request for quote or whatever, what is it typically? I'll call it a request for quote or whatever. What do you call that normally?
They're bidding on a job.
Bidding on a job. So I put that out there, and then I get 24 responses. As the company that's looking for that talent, how do I evaluate those?
There's a couple ways. I mean, you could do it kind of the traditional way, which is looking at the different profiles, seeing if they wrote a cover letter. You can require a cover letter. Maybe they'll give you a better sense of what exactly does this person feel like they have that suits what I need. You might require that every person that's bidding on the job answers certain questions. Like when I first started at Upwork, I posted a job for someone to do research, HR research, to help me start to comb what's out there around different topics that I knew I'd be talking about. But I wanted to be someone with previous HR experience, because any researcher might think something's relevant to HR that really isn't. Someone with experience knows how to filter and knows what what categories kind of fit together better. So then I wanted to know, what is your HR experience? How long have you been in HR? What types of roles have you had in HR? And what type of research have you done before? Like, those are things that I can quickly filter on, look at those questions and go, oh, that's not quite the experience I'm looking for. This is a lot deeper. Because you're right, you will post for a job and get a lot of candidates really quickly, and you want to filter. The reason I say that's more the traditional way, now we've launched generative AI tools that help you do that. Of course we did. Like, everybody is. So of course we launch AI tools that help filter the candidates for you and make recommendations. You can still see everyone that's bid, but maybe that initial filter shows you 3 that are a really good fit based on all those things that you set. And you look at them and you're like, wow, these are all great. It'll be easy to pick one.
Interesting. So we're almost out of time, but just, You mentioned, that by 2030, maybe half of the U.S. population might be working freelance, either full-time or at least as a side gig. What do you think the future holds? What do given your unique perch there at Upwork and seeing all of that and your corporate experience, what do you think the workforce is going to look like in 10, 15, 20 years? Do you really see the trend going to be more and more, freelancers and independent contract type work?
Yeah, I definitely think that's going to continue to grow. It's growing internationally. And certainly as governments kind of catch up and try to figure out like how they want to regulate, it's going to continue to be different, not only in different countries, but in different states and even cities. That'll evolve and change along with it. There's certainly a lot of things that I think all sides need to kind of balance and think about. But I think this is absolutely going to continue to grow. Companies aren't going to forego any of their full-time employees. And frankly, as we head into 2030, and you can read really interesting articles about the kind of skills gap we're going to experience over that period of time, I think we need any kind of resource available to companies that's possibly available. In addition to all of the advancements with technology, organizations need to have every lever or every option available to them to be able to sustain and compete for the next 5, 10, 15 years. And I also think what it's going to do, because it already is happening, is it's going to continue to democratize opportunities. One of my favorite sayings in this space is talent is distributed evenly everywhere in the world, but opportunity isn't. And the purpose for Upwork is to create economic opportunities so people live better lives. And that is something that resonates deeply with me and part of why I joined the company, because I truly believe that there's people in countries that won't have an opportunity to work for some big name Fortune 500 company in the US. But because they have access to a computer, because they have an internet, because they can train themselves on skills that are in demand pretty much by just going online and learning it for free, they might have access to those types of opportunities and develop and grow as a professional. And I think that democratization is just going to continue to spread to more places, giving more people these great opportunities, bringing more skill to bear for companies that desperately need it. And I think we're going to have a lot more universal, a lot more global, a lot more diverse workforce as a result.
That is a perfect place to end it. And we're out of time. So thank you so much for joining me, Tony.
Absolutely. This is my pleasure, Mike. Thanks so much for having me. And I look forward, hopefully we can talk again sometime in the future.
Yeah, I hope so. And thank you for listening. You can comment on this episode or search our previous episodes at goodmorninghr.com or on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcast. Rob Upchurch is our technical producer, and you can reach him at robmakespods.com. And thank you to Imperative's marketing coordinator, Marianne Hernandez, who keeps the trains running on time. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.